Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call our regular council meeting for Monday, March the 9th, 2020 to order. And to begin, as is tradition in these lands, we acknowledge that we are gathered this evening in Wasanish territory. Let us be mindful and consider the common interests we have with our First Nations neighbors who have for millennia and continue today to make decisions that support a sustainable region. I'd also like to mention that Councillor Garnett sends his regrets this evening. Not this way. He sends his regrets. He had a surgery earlier today. We wish him well and hope he's back in the saddle and joins us at our next meeting. Now look for a motion regarding our agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move to our public participation period, where members of the public are welcome to come forward and address council for approximately 3 minutes. We ask that you come forward, state your name and address, and press the little button for a red live microphone. Is there anyone wishing to address council this evening? Good evening.
Can you hear me? Okay. My name's Diane Faulkner. I live at 10457 Resthaven Drive in Sydney. And I just wanted to let you know that myself and my husband are here, Malcolm, tonight to deal with the letter that we've issued on behalf of the stakeholder group about the meeting on private mooring buoys in Seaham Harbour and the proliferation of those mooring buoys. So if there's any questions from council or staff, we'd be happy to take those and answer them as best we can. I'd just also like to ask that the issue be dealt with some urgency, because we know that there's an upcoming OCP review and it's a long process. This mooring buoy situation in Seaham Harbour in particular has been ongoing for about 15 years, and we're still at, it gets worse each year. We're still at a place where we really don't have a vision for Seaham Harbour yet, and I think that's the main focus that we'd like to draw attention to, is we need to know what it's going to look like. I think the town, the community needs to know what it's going to look like, and then we can work towards some steps to actually make it happen. And I'd like to thank the council and staff for the work that's happened in Resthaven Linear Park. And it's a really good example of what can be done, because 3 years ago that park was being used by boaters living in the harbour to access Sydney. It took away from the actual linear park. It took that away from the community. And since the city has taken steps to correct that, the children are coming back to play. The families are starting to walk around. The seniors are walking around that area. So it's really, the community has taken back that park, and it's really beautiful. And I think we now need to extend that action to Seaham Harbour and to Roberts Bay, because the Seaham Harbour, unfortunately, the problem has grown there. It's not yet grown in Roberts Bay. And so if I could urge you to do one thing tonight, it would be to protect Roberts Bay, because the beauty and the environmental issues that are there are not yet proliferated like they are in Seaham Harbour. And I think by protecting both the citizens and the waterfront owners, by banning mooring buoys, private mooring buoys in Seaham Harbour, other than those that are protected by riparian rights, it could go a long way to stop what could happen in Roberts Bay as well. And we know that it could and potentially will happen, because when the gorge in Victoria was cleaned up, several of the boaters moved to Central Saanich, Brentwood Bay, and several of Central Saanich boaters are now in Seaham Harbour. And guess where they'll go if Lilienhofer Park gets cleaned up? The gentleman that lives in Lilienhofer Park is, well, right now they have a water lease with North Saanich, so that could be dealt with fairly quickly. He's going to find some place to go. I would hate to see that to be Roberts Bay. So there are some immediate things that can be done to protect a resource that's already there and already belongs to the community. So that's one that could be dealt with tonight. We know that Seaham Harbour is a longer process. There is much more to be done there. As I said earlier, the vision, the cost, the administration involved, there's several avenues that could be taken, but it requires to understand what we want it to look like and what the community would be best served with first. So we ask you to put a plan in motion to actually take some action on that and move ahead on Seaham Harbour. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Greg Goodwin. I live in the same complex as Diane and Malcolm, and we didn't exchange notes beforehand, but I also want to congratulate and thank the council for their prompt action on Resthaven Park. It's both the compliance and enforcement preventing the little beach at that park from becoming more of a park and ride. I call it, for the boats in the bay. The problem has obviously moved elsewhere, but at least that beach is cleaned up. A couple of facts, and this is no surprise to anyone. We live on a migratory bird sanctuary. Shoal Harbour was established in 1931 by the federal government. Over 2,000 mooring spaces exist, with the number of marinas in that sanctuary at this very moment. The number of boats with free moorage has steadily increased in the 10 years that I've lived there, with the associated pollution and garbage that affects our water, our beaches, and the viability of the bird sanctuary itself. The recreational Dungeness crab catch has decreased significantly in the bay, as has the theft of traps increased. This speaks to changes in the environment, possible increased commercial crabbing, and of course nefarious people just deciding that something is their own when it's not. We recognize that there are multiple jurisdictions between federal, provincial, and local governments, and I would include Indigenous people as well, which may allow an out for anyone, as someone would say, no, that's somebody else's jurisdiction. But on the contrary argument, I would say it's an opportunity for someone to take a leadership role as well. So my request is to reduce the steadily increasing impact on the bird sanctuary, and as a general goal, in reducing the number of boats, particularly liveaboards. I know you may not be looking for prescriptions, but here's an idea. One idea would be to work with federal and provincial governments to earn some revenue by setting up a system of offering leases on Crown land for the footprint that is a permanent anchor of the liveaboards and the boats in CM Harbour. Although the waterway is navigable, therefore federal, the ocean floor to a degree is provincial Crown land. Setting up a system of leases would allow revenue to be generated, allow regulatory oversight to prevent direct discharge into the waterway, and hopefully reduce the overall number of boats, as many of the folks are frankly would be unable to pay and will be forced to move. So I encourage council to take a leadership role in this matter, along with the District of North Saanich. You have volunteers ready to help and assist and make connections and come up with some ideas. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, folks. My name is Don Pretty. My home address is 3832 Harrow Road in Victoria. I work out here on the peninsula at Canoe Cove Marina. That's how I feed my family. My volunteer job is I'm president of Boating BC, which is the recreational boating industry for the province. Been in existence for about 60 years. Previously called BC Marine Trades Association, now Boating BC. We spend a lot of time promoting boating and doing things to try to make boating more achievable for common people. And part of that is we, in this last 3 years or 2 years, got a grant from Transport Canada as part of the Oceans Protections Plan to educate boaters as to their responsibilities for the end of life on their boats, and where they may take those boats to properly dispose of them so they don't end up in the intertidal zone and polluting all of our waters. As many of you will know, on the last southeast wind we had in Victoria, I think there were 6 to 7 boats landed on the beach in Cadborough Bay down by Jarwa Park. That's a regular occurrence, and every one of those boats will have an impact on the environment. As part of our work with Boating BC, we also promote boating. And when all of the good and safe anchorages are tied up with squatters, and basically that's what these moorings are, they are squatters. This is crown-covered land, or water-covered crown land. It'd be the same as not just putting a tent up in a provincial park, but actually building a foundation and a building in a provincial park. We don't allow that, we shouldn't allow this. And I know with municipalities, you guys get hung with this, and it's really unfortunate. But we just need to keep the pressure on, and we can't keep delaying, I guess is the point I want to make. Anything we can do to help push the provincial and the federal government and the feds in that they still tend to promote what a authorized, quote-unquote, authorized mooring looks like, and they're not authorized at all. They're only authorized in the fact that they're this diameter and they got these letters on it and this reflective tape. They are not authorized as to where they are put. That's Crown land, and they should have aquatic licenses, or it should be managed. So my encouragement would be to keep the pressure on and to do everything we can to stop these, to manage these areas, and to clean them up, because it really is a sad situation. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm
Good
Malcolm
evening.
Faulkner. Diane has sort of given our address. It's 10457 Rest Haven. And thank you, Mayor and Council and staff for listening, for being here. I'd like to kind of talk to what I think is basically the root cause of the problem. And that is, all three levels of the government can regulate mooring buoys, but they have chosen to not to. So as it appears right now, it's totally unregulated. And so it is a valuable resource. If you go into Use Victoria today, there's one for rent for $240 a month. There's constantly boats for rent, mooring buoys for rent. You can have any amount of them. It's too valuable a resource to be a first come, first served basis. It does need some sort of regulation. So who is it to advantage to, and who are out there right now? Well, there's businesses, marine businesses, when their docks are overfull, they have a mooring buoy, they put them on the mooring buoy. The yacht clubs would both love to have 5 mooring buoys each for regattas, for overflow, for the reciprocals. Just the cost of dock space, people own them, and once they're in there, they're there for life. You save the cost. Obviously, if your boat's worth nothing and you have to get rid of it, then it's in our front yard and it's out and eventually becomes abandoned boats. People that own a boat, like myself, the areas that are, whether it's Nanaimo and Mark Bay now, it's really hard to get into, your little pockets in the middle of that you love. I can now go in and put a mooring buoy down there and call it my own in perpetuity. I can rent it out. I can give it to a friend to use. That's the problem. It is now, it guarantees that CM Harbour, soon Roberts Bay, and previously all the other jurisdictions, False Creek, the Gorge, whatever, it guarantees the prime real estate to be always full and continually more and more. Channels are blocked. There's not right, on top of it's more than full. It's more than capacity. Probably 40% of them are already with, breaking some regulation or other, even if transport was. So who should use them? Well, that's the vision. Parkland School has a sailing program now. The yacht club gives them dinghies. They compete against other schools. The yacht club use that for their junior program. They have 8-year-old kids trying to maneuver around in there. I mean, what's the water quality like? The juniors can't get up to speed, so they're now towed down the channel, out past the breakwater, into all of that traffic to do theirs. Kayaks, transient boaters to come and see Sydney. What is the vision? I mean, it can be so much more. I believe that the health of CM Harbour and the health of Roberts Bay is directly connected to the health of the community. So I would urge council not to be fogged by whether it's a social issue, because most of those boats that are out there are all for the reasons that I've said. It isn't that it is a social issue, but not a major one. The Gorge said they would deal with it. Nobody took them up on it. It's not a cost of living thing, because you can use that, and everybody can put a boat in there for the cost of living. So it really is a free-for-all for a valuable resource, and it'll always guarantee that it needs regulation. And thank you for...
Great, thank you. Good evening.
Is that, I guess it's still
You're
on.
live.
Okay. My name is Judith Sears, and I live at 2040 White Birch Road. I live in Sydney on the border with North Saanich, next to and just adjacent to Lilienhofer Park. Our condominium complex has a gate that goes into the park, and that's one of the reasons why we moved there. And today I'm telling you, you're going to have to act pretty fast, because another boat has come into the harbor there at Lilienhofer Park. So now there's 4 boats plus 2 sheds and a camper. And that's going to continue to happen very quickly. This was person who had lived out further now has come in. So one of the things that my husband and I, we came to Sydney with a lot of environmental experience. My husband had been president of Audubon Society. I started a community restoration of the Napa River flood control project in Napa, California. And we were used to seeing restoration of, and also in Fanny Bay, restoration of rivers and streams and tidelands like you have here. And at first, we walked out and we saw there were herons, there were oyster catchers, there were owls in the tree. Those are no longer there. And then we saw that this was labeled as a bird sanctuary, but there are cats roaming around. There's non-native plants everywhere. There's lawns, and every piece of property is private and not really an area that seabirds even can come up to. If you're calling this a migratory space for seabirds, I don't know. Songbirds, the trees are coming down so fast. A lot of the reason why we lost trees birds in our area was we also lost a lot of land in Blue Heron Park. That was a backup to Lilienhofer Park. And around us has been so much development and trees taken down and we just don't have the native habitat that birds love. And so I don't know, the horse is already out of the barn as far as I can see on improving the environmental impacts that are happening. I'm not sure that it can be done, but I'm saying it's happening really fast, so I'm hoping you can do something to help us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. For a second time, is there anyone wishing to address council this evening? Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for this time. My name is Curtis Evans. I live at 10301 Mena Place, and I'm here to speak to agenda item 14A. Low disturbance mapping is being done by essentially paddling out and carrying a camera into Roberts Bay. The Roberts Bay residents are constantly monitoring the number of buoys and, for myself, the number of ground tackle in Roberts Bay. And at this date, there's a number of crab traps. They change from day to day, and they do move around, but there's 12 buoys that are attached to at least some form of permanent ground tackle. 2 of those appear to be to the Department of Transport's requirements. The other ones are essentially crab floats or boat fenders on the ground tackle, but we are constantly monitoring them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't know whether I can address you because I don't live in Sydney.
You certainly
I
can.
live in North Saanich. Is that okay?
You certainly can, sir. Your name and address?
But yes, it definitely is a matter for the town here. And we enjoy very much to come and dine and shop and all that in your beautiful town. It is about the virus.
If I could you give us your name, sir?
Yes, of course, Sigurd Sabatil. And we moved originally a year ago from Bowen Island. And so we really enjoy the area and your town. And my subject is very, very important. I realized how many seniors are in your beautiful town. I believe about 3,000-4,000. seniors above the age of 60, and the seniors are especially endangered by the virus. People, men like me, I'm 81 years old, are really endangered to die from the virus if I ever get it. Now, we have a real problem going on, and that is that people from risky countries that we hear every day, we hear on the news, risky countries where the virus is out of control, are coming in Vancouver Airport by the thousands. These are tourists. These are non-essential travelers. The federal government asked us Canadians not to do any non-essential travel to other countries, right? Because we may come back with the virus. And here we have people from risky countries coming in by the thousands, and some of them come with the ferry, with the BC ferries to Swartz Bay on buses, in bus loads, and go down, luckily bypassing this town and going into the Greater Victoria area. But we have a situation here. You heard about Italy, what happened? Out of the blue, the government people didn't know what was happening. Where did this come from? Well, I researched it a little bit, and lo and behold, they get 5 million visitors from China, from Korea, etc., etc. 5 million a year. We get only 1.4 million from the same countries here, Vancouver Airport. And so, what am I asking? I'm asking something very, very simple from you. And that is somebody, the mayor or whoever, email or phone the immigration department in Ottawa and ask them, what are your intentions about unnecessary travel from these risky countries into our area here? Why is that continuing? Or will you change your policy? It's very simple. I tried this. I emailed them with the same question, and you run into a system there's a computer that checks your subject, and the subject isn't there, namely policy. I asked about policy, right? The computer can't handle it. But they told me then, or wrote back, that I might get, if my subject of my email is worthy for consideration, they will send me an answer in 6 weeks' time. In 6 weeks' time, we have another 6,000 people coming in from these countries there. So, I don't know. People, I have the information here. I have 4 sheets of documentation here. Of course, I have the profile, of population in this town, right? It's right there. That shows a large segment of old seniors, which we have. I have a printout from the border services showing exactly what numbers of tourists are coming in from what countries and from what risky countries, black and white. I have another one which shows the risk to die from the virus by age, and it's very high for seniors over 80 years and older. You have quite a few of those. I was just amazed. You can't believe it. It's the top bar here.
Sir?
Yeah.
There is lots of information available. We thank you for bringing some of it to our
Okay.
attention. Would you like to wrap up with you've
Yes,
made your request?
absolutely.
You've
Sorry.
made your special request.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening. And it's a very simple thing I suggest, because I can't get the information. I'm nobody as far as the federal, immigration department is. But if an inquiry comes from you, maybe you'll get an answer.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for speaking this evening. I'll call for last time if there's anyone wishing to address council. And seeing none, I'll bring public participation to a close. Thank you. We have no public hearings or presentations this evening. We'll move to bylaws, and 5A is bylaw number 2187, the amendment number 1 to our reserve fund establishment bylaw. At the February 24th council meeting, we received a staff report on the amendments and gave first, second, and third reading.
Move adoption of bylaw number 2187, Reserve Fund Establishment Amendment number 1.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And we'll move to development permits. We have development permit application DP 100781 and development variance permit application number DV 100274. And at our February 24th council meeting, we had we considered APC's recommendation, and we made a recommendation that staff be directed to send out notices for the 3 requested variances for the development variance permit application. Staff, could you give an update if there was any response?
Just one, Mr. Mayor.
Right, just one written response to that. We have a recommendation before us.
I'll move the recommendation, number 1, that development variance application number DV 100274 to vary the requirements for an accessory building setback, number of adaptable units provided, and access aisle width be approved subject to the following conditions. A, that the applicant redesign the accessory building to eliminate the canopy over the rear parking area in order to eliminate the need for a variance. B, that as conditions of approval of development variance permit application number DV 100274, the property owner shall, prior to issuance of building permit, register a covenant on title specifying that the drive aisle accessing the rear parking lot area is to remain free of obstructions at all times. Prior to issuance of building permit, register a restrictive covenant on the title of the property with the town as a signatory, prohibiting the future strata council from passing any bylaws that may restrict occupancy of the building based on age. Prior to issuance of building permit, register a statutory right-of-way to allow for a portion of the public sidewalk to be located on the subject property. Prior to issuance of occupancy permit, install a sign for vehicles exiting the site reading yield to oncoming traffic, as per the memorandum from Watt Consulting Group dated March 8, 2019, and install a 2 meter wide concrete sidewalk along the entire frontage of the property as part of the frontage works associated with this development. And 2, that if council authorizes the issuance of a development variance permit application number DV 100274, then development permit application number DP 100781 for the form and character of a 2-story townhouse development containing 4 dwelling units be brought before council for consideration of approval with the following conditions. A, that the property owner be required to submit a revised architectural and landscape plans addressing development permit guidelines number 20.3.21, pedestrian walkway surface materials, number 20.3.29, utility kiosk and meter locations, and number 20.3.34, tree canopy over public sidewalks to the satisfaction of the senior manager of current planning. B, that the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of a building permit, pay to the town a deposit in the amount of 115% of the estimated cost to complete the hard and soft landscaping for the development. And C, that if the protected Douglas fir tree on the neighboring property at 10390 Patricia Place is not removed by the town's planned infrastructure work on sewer and sewer mains in that area, then the applicant shall install tree protection fencing to the satisfaction of the Director of Engineering prior to commencing any site work and retain an arborist to supervise any excavation within the root zone of the protected tree.
Second?
Second, discussion, you wish to speak to it, motivate?
Just
Councillor
briefly, if I may, that although I have concerns that this project is not complying with a requirement for adaptable units, and that has been approved for that point, I would say that there is so much else that's going on with this project that is a benefit to the community at large, both with the environment, financial, in that they're retaining the existing building and working with that. I think there's enough, from my perspective, that is a gain, that the fact that there aren't adaptable units in this project is something that I could work with.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I speak about the merits of the particular application, I'm noticing an issue with the wording of number 2. And the last sentence says, be brought before council for consideration of approval with the following conditions. But I think what we actually want is be approved subject to the following conditions. So I'd like to move that amendment, that we replace be brought before council for consideration of approval with the following conditions, and replace that with be approved subject to the following conditions.
Do we have a seconder for the amendment?
Second.
Okay, discussion. I think it's, I'll call a question on the amendment. All those in favor? That motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Wainwright, for that, noticing that.
Okay, with respect to the application, we had one letter of objection, and reading that particular letter, they're actually objecting to the density, not any of the variances, but rather the project allowing additional units on the site at all. So that actually is not relevant to the variances being requested. With respect to the variances being requested, APC had a substantial discussion about the accessory building, and I appreciate the interest of the owners in not redesigning the canopy on that accessory building, but I'm in support of APC's recommendation on that. I'm fine with all the other aspects that are being requested, but I agree with the need to redesign the canopy.
Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll concur. I'm comfortable with following APC's recommendation here as per Councillor Wainwright's comments. We vet these projects through advisory planning for this purpose, and they brought it to our attention, and so I'm comfortable generally with the variances that remain. Like Councillor Follett, it's unfortunate with regard to the adaptable variance that's being requested here, but I know that was addressed during presentation when we saw this previously, and so I'm prepared to support the motions. Thank you.
Thank you. I might have a question and a comment with regards to recommendation 1A. There is a recommendation, one of the recommendations in part 2 indicates that architectural and landscape plans addressing a specific development permit guidelines be to the satisfaction of the senior manager of current planning. 1A is that the applicant redesign the accessory building to eliminate the canopy over the rear parking area in order to eliminate the need for a variance. And I'd like to ask staff which staff that will be to the satisfaction of, and perhaps suggest council make an amendment.
Sure, to the mayor, that would also be the senior manager of current planning, just to make sure the plan has been amended before the variance is registered on title.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have no consideration of an amendment. Any further, Councillor Weiner?
I guess following up on your comment, you're suggesting we add redesign the accessory building to the satisfaction of the senior manager of current planning?
Mm-hmm.
I'll move that we insert that.
Second.
All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call a question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And thank you to members of APC for the thorough review and staff and those recommendations. We'll now turn to adoption of the minutes for our regular council meeting of February 24th.
Move adoption.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Just catch up here. So we do have business arising from an in-camera meeting held on February 24th. This is for information only. And it's with regards to a resignation from our Economic Advisory Committee and the resolution that the email from Ms. N. King dated February 13th, 2020, advising of her resignation from the Economic Advisory Committee be accepted and that a letter be sent to Ms. King thanking her for her service, and 2, the letter be sent to the Sydney Business Improvement Area Society, the SBIA, requesting that they nominate a new member to serve on the town's Economic Advisory Committee. We don't have any petitions or delegations. This evening in my mayor's report, I'd like to speak to the introduction of the First Nations carving that we have hanging, now hanging on the Chamber's wall. I'm very pleased to acknowledge that we now have a beautiful and meaningful First Nations spindle whorl carving hanging in our council chamber. On February 26th, we were pleased to host a gathering with the young Coast Salish artist from the Sartlip First Nation, Chaz Elliott, who we commissioned to do this carving. The gathering included many members of his extended family, including Sartlip Elder John Elliott, Sartlip Councillor Gordon Elliott, who is here on behalf of Sartlip Chief Don Tom, his father, Master Carver Charles Elliott, along with many community organization leaders, many of whom have relationships with First Nations, and along with my council colleagues and staff. Chaz Elliott put a great deal of thought into creating a carving for our chamber, and these were his remarks that will be included in a little plaque with the carving. The carving is made from cedar, and at the top, the carving depicts the sun rising over the land, representing new beginnings. Each sun ray consists of different beings from which the Coast Salish people draw their teachings and lessons. In the center, the land has a human face to signify Mother Earth. The wolves on either side represent balance over the land. The orcas at the bottom illustrate unity. In the lower center, the paddle represents working together. The way the paddle is raised, with the handle down and the paddle up, is known as a sign of peaceful intentions among First Peoples. Chaz Elliott's carving is beautiful and unique. It's a wonderful representation of the Wasanich people's culture, heritage, traditions, and of the relationship we're building between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people living together on this land and the waters of the Salish Sea. In early December, when we hung the town crest in the council chamber, I spoke to the importance of recognizing the 129-year history of the town site of Sydney in the establishment of our local government. The British Columbia flags represent that local governments in British Columbia are established and empowered by the provincial government. The Queen's portrait represents that Canada is a constitutional monarchy, and along with the Canadian flags, they represent that those who vote municipally, provincially, and federally and participate in our democracy are Canadian citizens. The Coast Salish carving will remind us that the Wasanich people lived here for thousands of years before our town site was established. When Sydney Council, town staff, and the public meet here, we will be reminded of the carving's meaningful messages and the importance of building our town of Sydney and Wasanic Nations relationship, and of being mindful whenever we are doing our council work of the remarkable stewardship of the territory by the Wasanich people for millennia. Thank you. Now I'd like to turn to to council reports. I don't think we have any this evening. Seeing none. We'll move on to committee reports. We have our committee of the whole meeting. Councillor Wainwright.
I'll move that the minutes be received.
Discussion, those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, the first recommendation is with respect to a development variance permit at 9335 Webster Place. It was recommended by committee, and I so move, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that's 246 feet, of 9335 Webster Place be notified regarding development variance permit application number DV 100293 to relax the minimum front yard setback, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, the second item on the agenda were the grants and aid requests, and this is a list of all the grants that committee is recommending that be approved with the amounts. I'd note that some of the organizations are ones where members of council have a conflict of interest, and that means they shouldn't be voting on that particular item. So I'm going to deal with this in pieces, and I'll start out with the first item where a member has a conflict of interest. That's the Sydney and Peninsula Literary Festival.
And I'll recuse myself and ask Councillor Wainwright to continue. I have a conflict of interest with the society. I benefit financially when they host their events.
Thank you. So, as the mayor's left the room and I'm the acting mayor, I'll preside over the meeting. Thank you.
I'll move that we approve $500 for the Sydney and Peninsula Literary Festival.
Second.
That's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Can we bring the mayor back? I guess actually while we're waiting for him, the next two items are Cycling Without Age Society and Sydney Guide and Scout Hall Society. And Councillor Duncan?
And so I'm recusing myself because I have an appearance of conflict of interest with both of those. I used to be on the board of the Cycling Without Age Society when it started up, and I think my face is still on some of the literature, even though I haven't been on the board for some time. And I'm a scouter for beavers, so.
Thank you.
Just wait for her to leave the room. Okay, so I'll move that a grant of $1,000 be approved for Cycling Without Age Society and $1,000 approved for Sydney Guide and Scout Hall Society.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
And the next motion will be with respect to Peninsula Dry Grad Society.
And I'll recuse myself from this item, Mr. Mayor, as my son's grade 12 student French immersion at Stellies.
Thank you.
Little musical chairs here.
Okay, I'll move that $1,000 be approved for Peninsula Dry Grad Society.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. I need a baton to.
Okay, that was the last conflict of interest, so now the big list. I'll move that $2,800 be approved for the Saanich Marine Rescue Society, $1,500 for Peninsula Streams Core Operations, $1,000 for Peninsula Streams School Programs, $500 for Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission, $1,000 for Saanich Peninsula Folk and Fiddle Festival Society, $1,000 for Geronimo Canoe Club, $500 for Saanich Peninsula Pipe Band, $700 for Crisis Intervention and Public Information Society, $500 for Greater Victoria Bike to Work Society, $750 for 676 Kitty Hawk Sponsoring Committee Society, $750 for Navy League of Canada, and $500 for BC Aviation Museum Society, which, including the previous motions, totals $15,000.
Second.
Any further any discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Wainwright.
Okay, the next list are grants and aid to be denied. I am involved in Radio Sydney, but since the motion is to deny their application, that's not a conflict of interest. So I'll move that the following grant applications be denied. Sydney Art and Media Society, that's Radio Sydney. ORCA, Oral Care for Children and Adolescents. Wounded Warriors Canada, Mount Newton Centre Society, Sydney Concert Society, Peninsula Figure Skating Club, Saanich Peninsula Piranha Swim Club, and Capital Region Food and Agricultural Initiatives Roundtable.
Second.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
again, Councillor.
And there were two more recommendations with respect to grants. The first recommendation, and I so move, that a general discussion regarding grants and aid, i.e. line items in the budget versus individual requests, and setting criteria for awarding grants, be deferred to a future committee of the whole meeting.
Second.
Discussion. Call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries.
And the final motion, and I so move that the letters being sent to organizations that have been approved grant and aid funding, including a request that the town's grant funding and other municipal grants be listed as a separate revenue source in their financial statements.
Second.
I'll call the question. Those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. Just before moving on to staff reports, I'd just like to, and thank you, Councillor Wainwright, just like to make a comment that through this grant and aids program, which is a very small subset of the overall municipal budget, it's a process we do separately, is a total of $15,000. And we had requests, we did grant to 16 organizations. We had 24 requests for $45,000. So of course, I know it's disappointing, or we know it's disappointing to several organizations that funding wasn't granted. We did have careful deliberation and reasoned over giving these particular grants to these organizations. We feel it's of great benefit to the community. Apart from this $15,000, in our budget this year that we approved last month, we approved over $1 million in other supports to several community organizations. Some of them very visible, such as the Mary Winspear Centre, the Shaw Centre for the Sailor Sea, but also for things like school crossing programs, the DARE program in high schools, and I could go on and on. So this isn't the only support that we're providing to these types of organizations. There is what we refer to as line item funding or one-off decisions that we make in our budget process. And hence the recommendation, the second last recommendation that was made, to have a future discussion with regarding grants and aids, and the term was used, line items in the budget versus individual requests. So for example, the Sydney Museum and Archives, several years ago, for many years, used to come forward every year asking for their grant from the town of Sydney, and we would consider it with grants and aid. The grants and aid budget was a lot larger at that time, but year after year we were granting them their operating funds. One of the reasons is because all of the artifacts in the Sydney Museum and Archives are owned by the town of Sydney. So we decided to make that a line item such that they don't come back each year asking for that basic level of funding. So we do give significant funding through the regular budget process and over $1 million in grants, and this is a smaller process meant for the much smaller grants to these organizations, which is certainly helpful to them. Thank you. We'll now move to staff reports, and we have item 13A, which is the Victoria Airport Authority Development Referral regarding Titan boats at 2035 Beacon Avenue West. We have a report from staff dated March 3rd, and I'll ask staff to introduce this, please.
Sure, through the mayor to council. This is a development referral from the Victoria Airport Authority. So this property is on the south side of Beacon Avenue West. If you can imagine, you've crossed the highway, the road has an intersection with Gallaran and then continues on and then turns to the right, and the name changes to McDonald Park Road. This proposed land is a lease area on airport land, south side of Beacon Avenue West. If you've driven past, you've noticed it's recently been fenced in with a tall chain link fence. It is a proposal for a new facility for Titan boats. There's information in the staff report about what the proposed use of the building is. Boat manufacturing. It will be a new industrial building. The process for the referral comes to us from an accord signed by the town and the Victoria Airport Authority in the year 2000. That's when the town entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Victoria Airport Authority regarding these land use and development guidelines for any new development that happens within the town of Sydney that's also on lands controlled by the Victoria Airport Authority. Those lands are federal lands leased by the federal government to the Airport Authority, who then subleases portions to individual business owners for their business operations. So when we receive a development referral, the accord contains language that gives the town 40 days to review that and respond to the Airport Authority with comments. And it lays out in the memorandum of understanding what staff are supposed to look at when they do these reviews. So staff are supposed to identify any possible impacts on municipal infrastructure, provide comments on the compatibility of the proposed development to the surrounding community, and provide any other comments and suggestions as appropriate. So in the past development referrals that Sydney's received, just pull up some notes here. In the year 2015, we received two, one for an addition to Scott Plastics building on Henry Avenue West. Also one in September of 2015 for the new Sea Star Chemicals building at the corner of Henry Avenue West and McDonald Park Road. And then most notably in 2016, from May to September, there was an OCP and zoning amendment, which was not a development referral, but a Sydney process for the Sydney Crossing development, originally called Gateway Development and Sydney Crossing. And then once the OCP and zoning process was complete in September 2016, the town received a development referral from the Airport Authority in November 2017. And each of those development referrals followed the same process that this one for Titan Boats is following.
Thank you. So we'll have lots of information before us and a staff recommendation. Councillor Wainwright.
I'll move that council direct staff to reply to the Victoria Airport Authority with a statement of no significant concerns regarding the development referral for the property at 2035 Beacon Avenue West, Titan Boats, with the following comments for consideration by the Victoria Airport Authority. 1, that the north elevation be modified to increase visual interest along the building face fronting Beacon Avenue West. 2, that the proposed outdoor storage area be revised to ensure no overlap with any required parking space and or access aisle to a required parking space. 3, that the perimeter fence be modified to provide a year-long visual barrier for the proposed outdoor storage area. 4, that the proposed fire hydrant be relocated to the south side of Beacon Avenue West. 5, that any proposed BC Hydro extension and site servicing be installed underground. And 6, that the proposal be revised to include additional lighting for the proposed driveway and nearby multimodal flight path.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a question, perhaps through you to staff, is when I look through the report, there was a number of issues that staff seemed to have concerns about, but they weren't included in the staff recommendation. So I wasn't sure if those things had been covered off elsewhere, or I just didn't understand the terminology. So the things that highlighted for me was they talked about screening of parking areas in the report and screening of storage areas, and I didn't see anything covering that off. Staff also had concern about wanting to have more info on pre and post development storm flows, so wondering how that is going to work. Also about a mechanism to filter oil out before entering the bioswales, and establishing a turning radius on plans for emergency vehicles. So I don't know if those things are still concerns or whether they need to be included in the recommendations.
Sure. Speaking to several of those items, and the item you mentioned about the screening of the parking areas and the outdoor storage, in the recommendation item 3, there is that the perimeter fence be modified to provide a year-long visual barrier for the proposed outdoor storage area.
Okay.
So there is that we'd like them to at least screen the storage, if not all the parking.
Okay.
Staff have already sent more technical comments to the VAA to pass, or to the consultant hired by the VAA that reviews the development proposal in terms of the stormwater issues, in terms of the pre and post development modeling, and the emergency access in terms of the turning radii for vehicles getting into the site. We've already sent technical comments with a strong preface that these are not our official referral response comments. They're just staff comments as they've come up in terms of those items. Yeah.
So I guess my question is are those comments just coming from staff strong enough, or do you need council to make those recommendations? Or do you feel that it's sufficient as it is?
Through the mayor to council, the airport authority is really the one reviewing the development application and looking for changes from the applicant. We're reviewing it, raising issues that they might want to look at, but really the airport authority is the one who would be approving the permit. So, in the past, we've done the same thing, sent more technical comments at a staff level, and then highlighted the top issues in the recommendation in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Wintour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for starters, I just want to recognize that I think it's fantastic to see a local employer who makes a fantastic, well-recognized product growing and choosing to maintain their business here in Sydney and on airport property. So really, really pleased and happy for their success. The building itself, I think, is attractive given its purpose. One concern I have, and I think it's somewhat unfortunate that what we would consider the front of the building is facing the airfield as opposed to Beacon Avenue West, meaning Beacon Avenue West is essentially getting the parking lot, and some of the delivery aspects are more on the sides of the building, but also some on the Beacon Avenue West side. And so with that in mind, and frankly, I think I understand it. If they're looking for office space and they're looking for the views over the airfield, I understand their approach in their investment and dealing with it this way. But we need to work with the airport around ensuring that the community is well represented as well in terms of the aesthetic aspects of the development. And so my question, Mr. Mayor, through to staff, is around the first bullet on the recommendation. I want to make sure I understand that it's referencing, for example, a berm or something that is going to help with the visual appearance from Beacon Avenue West. That bullet number 1 reads that the north elevation be modified to increase visual interest along the building face fronting Beacon Avenue West. So does that mean we're talking about a berm and increased vegetation, or what does that mean?
No, it means we're looking for them to make the building more interesting on that face, possibly with the use of a greater variety of building materials or textures or colors, or adding windows, or doing something to make the building itself more interesting, not to screen it more from the road. Okay, so I remain in favor of that particular aspect of the staff recommendation then. I will note if on airport property and other developments, we have seen in North Saanich where perhaps after the fact, if it didn't happen initially, berms introduced along between the roadway and the buildings themselves with increased vegetation. And so my preference would be to see the recommendation include, unless staff and council feel it's otherwise presented here, landscaping and reference to a berm where possible. So I'll yield to staff's input first. Sure, through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul. On the drawings for the development, from the fence line, it goes directly to a proposed new swale, a ditch, to control stormwater, which would be landscaped and planted, but they are proposing to use that as part of their on-site stormwater management system. So to do a berm as well would be behind the behind the bioswale. And then that may start to impact their loading bay for the site. Something to consider. Yeah, if I may, through to staff, I see on the drawing the northwest exposure. It appears like there's still a boulevard there in the drawings that we've received. So that would lead me to believe there's room there for a berm, but I do mind your point that it's possible that would interfere with drainage plans in the area. I think I'm happy if staff transmit the concern around not just the visual face of the building, but as well the landscaping and potential screening facing Beacon Avenue. Just to clarify, on the outside of the fence, so on the boulevard area beside the roadway, there's the fence, another bioswale, a ditch, and then the flight path that might be in the opposite order, like the pedestrian bicycle path and then the traveled road surface. So again, there may not be room for a berm beyond the fence line out towards the road, but we can pass those comments on to the applicant.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And Mr. Mayor, if I may, one final item, just ask staff to make reference to a planned traffic study that we already have in the works. With respect to this, I don't anticipate a business of this nature having a heavy volume of traffic, but I would ask that staff perhaps draw the parallel to the traffic study that we have included within the budget process.
If I can, through the mayor to council. So council is aware that as part of the budget process, funding, I believe in the amount of 60,000, has been approved to undertake a comprehensive traffic study associated with the area to the west of Highway 17. So this includes Beacon Avenue West, the Galaran, McDonald Park Road corridor. It includes lands within Sydney that are part of the VAA. It also includes lands within North Saanich to the west of McDonald Park Road, and that includes the Sandown site as well. So this study will be undertaken in partnership and with the cooperation of the VAA, as well as the District of North Saanich, as well as MOTI will be involved in providing information for the study as well. The focus of the study will be to evaluate the effects of potential development and to suggest any transportation improvements that may be deemed necessary for that area to accommodate both current as well as potential generated travel demands and impacts associated primarily with future development. So it'll also be looking at what is the potential build out for that area based on existing plans that the VAA has, as well as looking at the respective zoning bylaws of both municipalities as well. So staff are in the process of finalizing a request for proposals for that, an RFP for that traffic study, and it'll go out to consultants and will be undertaken as soon as practicable. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Humble. Thank you. Just a question on one of Councillor Rentoule's points with regards to the berm. So the swale that's on the Titan Boats property, that would accommodate some drainage off the Titan Boat lands, not just on the other side.
Yes, that's correct. Feel free to jump in. I understand if on the plan submitted by their consultant who designed their stormwater management system, the new proposed bioswale would catch surface water from the site when it's built out to flow into this ditch to hold it on site for longer than going out into the main.
Okay, thank you. Other comment, Councillor, do we have any other first-time speakers, or did you wish to speak on that point?
Yeah,
of the berm?
it was related to
Okay,
that.
if it's related to the berm, please go ahead.
Oh, well, not to the berm, but to the stormwater. So, so in the report, it talks about stormwater infrastructure is undersized for that area, and that staff have requested clarification from the project engineer on the assumptions used to calculate the pre and post development stormwater flows. So my question is, so once staff get that additional information back, and if staff are not satisfied that the solution proposed by the applicant is adequate to deal with the stormwater, and if changes or have to be made to the infrastructure, who covers that? Is the town responsible for that, or is it the airport authority, or the developer? I'm just wondering how that all works.
Through the mayor to council, the process I would sort of see is once we receive the information, we would review it. If we have concerns regarding the calculations or the pre and post flows, we'd respond back to the airport authority to advise them of our concerns with the expectation that they would take those into consideration, going back to the proponent of the project to resolve those.
And I guess just a follow-up question, what does resolving look like, I guess? So does that mean that they are responsible for expanding the infrastructure in that area? Or we would do that, or the airport would do that?
I would expect that they would modify their infrastructure to handle that post condition for stormwater.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to this interest in a berm for screening or improving the aesthetic from Beacon Avenue, I'm noting that the last plan in the package, they're actually proposing 13 maple trees along that frontage. And the notes say that those are 4 to 5 meters high. Also on this plan, there's quite a bit of plantings. It looks like it's low elevation shrubs along that entire frontage. And the artist's renderings of the building don't show any of that stuff. And they've got quite a bit of screening around the hydro kiosk, and the plans show that pretty much front and center. If you look very carefully, they have kind of a ghost outline of some trees, and that actually conceals quite a lot of the building. So I'm not really thinking there's a need to ask them for a berm, but it might be nice to actually see a better artist rendering of what it would look like with that landscaping. So I'll just kind of throw that out there.
Thank you for that. Are there any other comments? Okay, I just have one question with regards to the second recommendation regarding the parking. And so in the staff report, it's clear that the town of Sydney parking and loading bylaws is a calculation of 29 spaces, and that the proposed development is 31 spaces. 18 of the spaces are on hard surface on the property, and if I read this correctly, 13 spaces are on gravel boat storage area of the property. And in the staff comments, it says that the gravel boat storage area have not been counted towards meeting the required parking stalls, as they do not meet Sydney's surfacing requirements. So a question is are those surface requirements pavement or something other than gravel? But importantly, staff have also noticed, and it is included the main part of the recommendation or the comment for consideration, that the proposed outdoor storage area be revised to ensure that there's no overlap with any required parking space. So if they do what is suggested in the second recommendation, they will create the 31 spaces, and it won't be interrupted by the outdoor storage area. However, it still, in Sydney's calculation, wouldn't be considered because of its surface. Has staff considered whether including in the consideration that it be a material other than gravel, or does the gravel contribute to drainage, and that's the reason for leaving it as it is?
Through the mayor to council, I would expect that it's proposed as gravel for ease of maintenance and just to contribute to the permeable surface area to let the rainwater soak into the ground and not asphalt the whole site. So we're not recommending that they surface the whole thing with hard surface material. We're just recommending that they leave their designated parking spaces open to be used as parking spaces and not as parking / storage.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And thank you to staff for the detailed report and for councillor comments and input. We're now going to move to item 13B, which is subdivision application number SA 100206, which is at 9495 Maryland Drive, to waive the frontage requirements in order to subdivide the property into 2 fee simple lots. And we have a report from staff.
I'll move that section 4.1 of subdivision and development bylaw number 1390, that no parcel of land has less than 10% of its perimeter fronting on a street, be waived for proposed lots A and B of the subdivision of 9495 Maryland Drive.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And now we'll move to the letter received from the stakeholder group. Thank you for your patience as we move through our agenda. Oh, sorry, I have missed something.
13C.
13C, we have a staff report on the bed races on Beacon Avenue.
I'll move the recommendation that the Saanich Peninsula Hospital and Healthcare Foundation be granted permission to close Beacon Avenue from 5th Street to 3rd Street and a half block north of and south of on 4th Street between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on Sunday, August 30th, 2020, subject to the following conditions. 1, that SPHHF provide the town with proof of $5 million liability insurance, naming the town of Sydney as a third party insured during the course of the events. 2, that SPHHF conform to all town bylaws. 3rd, that SPHHF arrange a meeting with town staff of the fire department and the and the RCMP to review safety traffic requirements at least 30 days prior to the event. 4, that SPHHF send out notices to affected residents' businesses advising of the event on August 30th, 2020, and provide a contact number should there be any concerns, questions, at least 2 weeks prior to the event. 5, that SPHHF make their event smoke and vape free. 6, that the SPHHF work with the town to provide and maintain temporary toilet facilities for the event, the number and locations of these facilities to be approved by the town. And 7, that no costs are to be incurred by the town in relation to this event.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move to the correspondence. The letter from the CM Harbour Stakeholders Group dated February 29th.
I'd like to move a recommendation. It's slightly different than we have here, and that is to refer to staff to work with North Saanich staff for a report to council.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion? Councillor Fallon?
I think right now, if we can get staff to work together to come up with more information, I think this is we're moving in the right direction. I think this needs to be dealt with, and I'm really pleased that our municipalities are addressing this. And I think if we could get staff to work together and then come back with a report for councils to look at, would be a place to go.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, a comment. I just wanted to say how impressed I was by this group of citizens banding together, taking the initiative to compare notes and work together and come up with not just complaining about something, which has been an issue for a long time, but using your collective knowledge and expertise to actually come up with some recommendations. I also appreciate that I'm not someone who is familiar with these particular issues, so I really appreciated the comments that you all shared tonight. And I'm not experienced enough on the issue to know whether these recommendations are things that we can do, but I support having it go to staff. The only one thing I wanted to comment on in terms of the motion, or whether we can just have staff give us some idea of what sort of timeline that we would be working on in regards to this, whether this is something we could see at least getting kick-started in the next month or 2 months or six months. It seems like it has been something that's been around for a while, and it seems like the stars are aligning now that the two councils can work together. So it'd be nice to, while there's some momentum going, to be able to build on that. So maybe a question to you, Mr. Mayor, to staff in terms of what would be a reasonable amount of time do we think to
If I
putting
can,
you on the spot.
through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. So, yeah, we'll certainly, it is in the strategic plan to look
Yeah.
at this first and foremost. And if council recalls, we did also include a budget item for this as well. I think the next step will be, because it's my understanding that a similar letter has gone to North Saanich Mayor and Council for their consideration. We'll wait and see what transpires in terms of their resolution. If it's a similar resolution, obviously that the two staffs can work and collaborate together with respect to a report and response to our respective councils, then that'll facilitate things, and we'll be able to look at that. So it's fundamentally going to be a bit dependent on the capacity and resources in North Saanich and what their fundamental priorities are. But we'll endeavour to work with them and communicate with them as soon as we can on where they're at on this matter as well.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Keith.
Thank you. And I just one more follow-up comment. I'm not sure how we're going to be allocating that money that we've allocated. But I was reading something in Municipal World this past week magazine, and what it talked about was citizen engagement, and it was also something that was mentioned at UBCM as well, about municipalities tapping into the knowledge and experience within the community is preferable in many cases to hiring external consultants that might not have as much local knowledge. So I guess in terms of moving forward, that's something that I would just sort of like to be in our minds and make sure that we're communicating back to this group of citizens about next steps and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Councillor Rantoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll echo Councillor Keith's appreciation with respect to the group who've come this evening to present to council, and also for your work. This is a bit of a who's who list here with respect to the subject matter, so you've got some real horsepower behind the initiative. Thank you for that. It's a great further catalyst to see us address this and look to make changes. Mr. Humble had noted it's a strategic plan item for the town of Sydney. We've identified it as a priority. Your assistance, I think, is going to help us greatly to elevate the matter in addressing it further with North Saanich. Is the right approach, because as you've noted during the presentation, there's a knock-on effect to every one of these actions, and just simply moving these boats to the next location up the line would be North Saanich, and doing this in partnership will be tremendously helpful. I also think, not that I necessarily heard it in the presentation, but I'm familiar with parts of the waterway, and it is congested, particularly at certain seasons more so, and there's safety implications there as well to other vessels. And so I think that's an element of this that we have to be cognizant of as the municipalities look to move forward and address this. So my appreciation, and I'll certainly support the motion to address this in conjunction with North Saanich. Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. Councillor Fallon has put on a motion for our staff to work with North Saanich staff, and so I assume that they would simply reach out to their counterparts using, the communication channels they have. Would it be useful or more proper for us to include a letter for North Saanich to their council with our resolution?
To just to update this, and appreciation again to the Falconers. The Falconers invited Mayor Orr and myself together to a meeting probably well over a year ago with kind of a subset of these stakeholders, and we subsequently had a meeting with myself, Mayor Orr, Mr. Humble, our CAO, and the CAO of North Saanich. And since that time, that meeting I think was late last summer, early January, was that was another stakeholder meeting that we had at the Scholl Center. But so the staff have been in communication back and forth on this, and I think Mayor Orr and I attending the recent workshop that led to this letter from the stakeholder group. Our discussions are that we look forward to seeing our staff work together on this. So I don't think I don't think there needs to be more communication via letter. I think staff are already in sync, if you will, on aspects of this. Okay. Any other comment? I just like to make a couple of comments. Again, echoing my colleagues on the diverse experience that's come together in this stakeholder group in the most recent. This does go back to just over a year ago when the Falconers started bringing stakeholders together. We did have a workshop that Sydney North Saanich hosted at the Scholl Centre. We had all of the other jurisdictions there, Coast Guard, Transport Canada, Ministry of Transportation. We had First Nations, we had Elizabeth May, Adam Olson, and a number of stakeholders. And two things came out of that meeting, or one thing came out of the meeting, that the federal legislation was changing. That legislation did change, I guess it was late summer last year. And while some of the legislation might have made things clearer to a certain extent amongst the jurisdictions, one thing it didn't do is necessarily add resource to tackle the challenges. So sort of a rewriting of some jurisdictional aspects, but not really dealing with the challenge of resource to meet the existing regulations that are out there. The second stakeholder group, I think it was with the CAOs that we had discussion with regards to what Central Saanich had been proceeding with over a lengthy period of time. I'm not sure if it was a year or two, requesting Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure of the province to pursue a license of occupation, which would give Central Saanich more jurisdiction, more control over the waters. They waited quite a length of time for that. That came back to Central Saanich at some point late last year. Central Saanich at this time, I think, is still considering it, but it doesn't appear to be viable for something to move forward with at this time. So I guess out of a couple of those outcomes, the federal process, the provincial process, the larger stakeholder group has come together, I think representing all possible interests in this matter. And we're pleased to see a focused letter come forward. Two comments I'd like to speak to that came. One was with regards to the official community plan process that we're fully engaged in here. This letter and this process doesn't have to fall into and have an outcome at the same time as the OCP. It can, there can be aspects worked on without waiting for that to be addressed through the OCP process. Of course, the OCP process will, in policy, want to speak to speak things like to environmentally sensitive areas and that sort of thing. But I don't want the stakeholder group to feel that necessarily this will, automatically fold into the OCP process and necessitate another 2 years of waiting for review. And the other was with regards to, and this came out of the stakeholder workshop that we attended, the fact that Roberts Bay does have some differences, even though it's in the bird sanctuary area and consider, is part of Shoal Harbour and Seaham Harbour. The Seaham Harbour, where the commercial fishery is and all of those marinas and boating interests are there. It does have all of the challenges that are addressed in these letters, but there are some unique aspects to Roberts Bay. And if there are, given that Roberts Bay is in Sydney, if there are aspects towards moorage buoys and other aspects, I think that it's a possibility for staff to look at those concerns separately, or to address those. That again, that doesn't necessarily have to wait to the whole packages or the whole review is underway. So thank you again. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you again. I'd just like to, under new business, and I was remiss in addressing this under Mayor's report. We had a speaker this evening speak with regards to his concerns, and certainly I'm sure there are others in the community, with regards to COVID-19. It's in the media 24/7, and I want to acknowledge that our town staff, our fire chief in charge of emergency planning, our CAO, Mr. Humble and others of the emergency executive have had discussions with regards to the town's role in COVID-19. And I have to say that that the province, I listened today to nearly an hour of a live broadcast from the BC health officer and the provincial minister of health, answer every conceivable question from the media on this. And my takeaway, sorry, I should also mention that we have a Vancouver Island Health. The province is broken into regions, and so there are regional medical health officers. There is a medical officer for all of Vancouver Island under VHA, and then there are 2 medical officers for southern Vancouver Island. And we had staff, senior staff, involved in a conference call with all municipalities on Vancouver Island with the Vancouver Island health officer. And so the different levels of the health office and the different levels of the government, whether it be the provincial government or the federal government, are in constant contact on this. And they do have substantial plans. And the town of Sydney has a plan as well if things become, go beyond where they are today, if they evolve beyond today. The health officer has given guidance as to best practices, and the town of Sydney, as of last week, put up on its homepage a direct link to many of the good resources that are out there, including the BC Centre for Disease Control, including the provincial health officer. I encourage everyone in the community, if they haven't already accessed definitive resources on the internet, to certainly consult the town's page and link to those resources. So the matter that the gentleman has spoken to this evening is under consideration by, certainly the federal authorities if it's immigration. And in terms of port of entry, there was excellent discussion in the press conference today from the provincial health officer on all those aspects. So I just wanted to speak to that separately. Now I'd like to move to item 16, which is our correspondence for information.
Move receipt.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We have no notices of motion, but we do have a motion to go on camera. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Motion that it is in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters respecting personal information pursuant to section 90.1A of the community charter, that the council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second? Do we have a second or did I miss?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you again.